The handling on this bike is probably one of its most impressive features to me. The bike with these accessories probably weighs close to 870, in that range, 860, 870, and you wouldn't know it when you ride it. It's the steering is remarkably light, over 7 or 8 miles per hour, in that range. It handles. I can't say it handles like a sport bike, but it does feel so much lighter than what it is. It also it doesn't dive. The chassis is very rigid. I've had this bike on the track, and I've done 93, 94 down the straightaway, and then just grabbed the brakes, slowed down, taken a hairpin turn to the right, and just hit the gas, and it tracks beautifully. It doesn't get upset. It just holds its line very nicely. You just don't notice the weight of the bike when you're on the road. It's a very, very easy bike to ride. I'm not saying it's a beginner's bike, but I'm saying that if you're like me and 2 years ago you were riding a Suzuki Boulevard C50 at this time, you could probably step up to this, and after a week of changing underwear somewhat frequently, you would be pretty comfortable on this bike. Something that Indian does very well, I don't know exactly how they do it, it's very strange to me, is these floorboards, you can't scrape them. It's impossible. Now, I do know a guy that actually scraped the underside of his exhaust pipes on a turn. That's a neat trick. I've seen it. That's pretty cool. But I have yet to scrape a peg or a floorboard, even on the track. Even taking turns at 50 miles an hour, going around these corners where I was trying to scrape a peg or a floorboard. I'm going to keep saying peg because I'm a moron. But I was trying to scrape a floorboard and I couldn't do it. So I don't even think about it anymore. The floorboards don't flex like traditional floorboards. They actually, that's not totally true. They will, but you have to hit them really, really hard, and they will flex up a little bit. But they're not like on springs, like other bikes that I've seen. But it doesn't feel top heavy. It feels very neutral, and really, you get into these corners and you don't feel like, oh my gosh, I'm going to go over. It just holds its line. So scraping floorboards, not an issue. Because of the rake, this rake is substantially different from the Chief and Chief Classic. I'm sorry, the Chief Classic and the Chief Vintage. It's very different from that. And so it's a shorter rake, steeper rake, and really handling wise, it's just super easy. I really enjoy the handling on this bike. I find the suspension to be pretty much perfect on this bike. It feels pretty soft. You don't really feel bumps in the road very much. Softer than any bike I've had. My Hyosung, certainly, Suzuki, my Victory, and softer than many, many other bikes that I've ridden. Sally's Honda Aero, Shadow Aero, my friend's Road King. This has 4.5 inches of travel in the rear shock, and it is an adjustable air shock, which makes all the difference in the world, because as your cargo load changes, you can adjust that air shock and always get a very nice, compliant but soft ride. So suspension wise, I really like it. The front forks, again, there's really, I don't notice any dive. I can grab a handful of front brake in a panic stop, and the bike doesn't feel like, oh my gosh, it's really hunkering down in front. It's been fantastic in that regard. The brakes I have no complaints about whatsoever. They have stopped me every time I've needed to stop. They modulate nicely. They've stopped me in very abrupt situations where I've needed to almost panic stop, and I've really had no issues. For such a heavy bike, it comes to a stop really quite well. I think the argument could be made that maybe they feel just a tad wooden, just a little bit, not quite so much feedback, but I think that's purely subjective, and to be honest, I'm not even sure that I agree with myself on that. So that's sort of, those are my feelings on the brakes. Indian, back in early August, released an update for the brake throttle override. For some reason, when they released the Indians, they had programming in there that would basically make it so that if you were on the throttle and you hit the brake, let's say you want to do some trail braking, it would actually cut out the engine on you. It would just and that was no good. If you're used to using a little bit of brake into your corners and hitting the throttle, that's really not a good thing. Indian released a fix for that in early August, and you can take it to a dealer and have that flashed, and that problem will go away. So if you do get, let's say, a 2014 Chief or Chief Vintage or Chieftain, and you have that issue, you can take it to your dealer and ask them to remove the brake throttle override. It does not affect 2015 models. So let's talk about ergonomics a little bit. The ergonomics on this bike are actually a little bit strange to me. It took me a while, for example, to figure out why the kickstand is way up there, and it took me a while to figure out how to pick it up all the time without looking like an idiot while trying to get it. I still haven't accomplished that yet, but I'm getting there. Now, I think what's strange to me about this bike is that, number one, it's a reasonably large bike. It's a pretty heavy bike, but it's not for tall riders. This is a bike that, if you were under 5'9", you're going to be pretty happy with the bike. If you're over 5'9", I think that's about where the cutoff is, maybe 5'10", you're going to feel a little bit cramped. I find it strange that the floorboards, so the gear shifter and the brake, are really very close to you. Keep in mind, I'm like 5'7", 5'8", and for me, with a 28-inch or 29-inch inseam, it works fine for me. I can put my foot here and I can reach the gear shift just fine. No problem. If I want to stretch out, I've got Kuryakin pegs out there I can stretch out on, although typically I just rest my heel here and let my foot go out like that. Same thing on the brake. It's, for me, it's good. It's a nice close brake. Now I can ride, for example, a Victory Vision. I'm sorry, not a Victory Vision, a Victory Cross Country. I haven't ridden a Vision, but I can ride a cross country, which has controls that are at least, 4 inches further forward, and I really don't have any issue with it. But I don't have any issue with these either. But I think if you had longer legs than I did, you would find this to be cramped. The reason I say that the ergonomics are strange is that for as short as the reach is to the gear shift and the brake, the stock bars that you get on the Chieftain are actually a little bit more of a longer reach. So for a short person, when I got this bike, I thought, okay, I like the foot position, but the bars were actually out here, and you were always kind of leaning forward. It doesn't bother a lot of people. I know a lot of people that like their arms out straight and they like to be leaned forward, and so it may work out fine for them. For me, as I've detailed in many other vlogs, I had these bars modified. So I had them brought an inch added to them, had them brought closer, and then I had them rotated down so that my hands weren't so much straight out here as much as they were kind of down at an angle. So it's kind of a mismatch to me between the stock position on the feet and the stock position on the hands. That being said, what is nearly perfect for me is the position of the bars on the new Indian Roadmaster. They come out and they just slope down nicely, and they slope back towards you. So your hands are in a much more natural position. I really enjoyed my time riding the Roadmaster for that reason. I believe that you can get those bars for the Chieftain. In fact, I'm sure you can, because it's the exact same dash, so it's the same spacing. And I have a feeling that a 2015 Chieftain may actually come with those bars, with the new bars. So that's something to kind of look out for. I can't guarantee that, but I think that's the case.